Well, thanks for coming here. This is a very nice theater. I was just saying these chairs are comfortable. So if you want to take a nap, now's a good time. They could have footrests. That would be even better. Well, I want to go over... good job putting on the conference. I'm not being critical. I want to go over... what I like to do is kind of collect the ways people are being successful. That was very businessy. But I spend a lot of my time studying how people in large organizations do better at software, writing their own software, running it, whatever it is they do with programmers. And so, platforms are an interesting, fun topic nowadays. They always have been. I was a developer a long time ago. And that stuff below the application layer that a developer works with, as I'll get into, we're always interested in that. And so what I've been cataloging over the past several years is how mostly in large organizations, not so much what the technology of the platform is or how they integrate it together, because I just make slides nowadays, so I can't figure that stuff out anyways. But what I can figure out is how people work and the way that they kind of manage and strategize what they're doing, if you pardon that word, strategize. So that's what I'm going to go over here. 7 lessons from 7 years. Is it really 7 years or 6 or 8 or 10? I don't know, but 2 7s look really good there. You either have to do 3, 5, or 7 things, so I went for 7. And so some of the cases that I'll go over here have been going on for a while. Some of them are newer and things like that, but we'll get into it. So other than platforms being necessary, if you want to run an application, I think there's a lot of interest in it nowadays because of a little bit of what we see here. Now, this is from our most recent State of Kubernetes survey, and by we, I mean VMware, what we did. And what I pay attention to, because I like software, is there's all sorts of metrics, many of which I'm sure y'all have seen today and know, that go over how you might see what the fitness of your software capabilities are. And the one that I like to track that isn't universally awesome, just like any metric or thing, is how short your software release cycles are. Now, I've never really figured out what the difference between continuous delivery and continuous deployment is, because I figure you can't deliver unless you deploy, and once you've deployed, you've delivered. But whatever you want to call it, this ability to get software out at will, multiple times a day, weekly, monthly, whatever it needs to be, is a good indication of how well you're doing as far as your software capabilities. Again, you don't have to, but it seems like you probably should. And so if you look at the extreme interest, which I definitely feel, coming from a container orchestration world that is not Kubernetes, if you're familiar with Cloud Foundry, which still exists, still great. But nowadays, Kubernetes is sort of the thing that people want to build platforms on. And certainly my salespeople tell us what they want to build platforms on. But you see that over the years, it hasn't really helped out developers too much. You can see, they say you're not supposed to put charts like this up in slides because no one can read them. But what they don't tell you is that then you can tell the audience exactly what to think, which I will demonstrate now. But what you see here with the, let's see if my laser works, with this green line is about several years ago when you had like the early innovators, the people who would put up with anything dealing with Kubernetes. It was working out well because they would do whatever you want. But as it's become more and more popular, you see that shortening the development cycles has lessened, right? And I don't know about you, but anecdotally, and I'm a big fan, being a philosophy major rather than engineering or whatever, of the idea that data is just a plural for anecdote. And so, I think what you see here is that as more and more people are using Kubernetes, building out their platforms, as it enters more of the mainstream, people are realizing that we need to build a platform around that. We've got to actually have a lot of thought into what we do for a platform if we want to be successful with it. Now, what I noticed the other day when I was thinking about this chart, I'm so focused on application development, I didn't actually pay attention to the rest of it, and these other numbers seem to be going the wrong way as well. So I need to go talk with our marketing people and see if what's up with that. So just to kind of kick off as an example, right? So this is a great talk. If you do want to take a nap, you should at least watch this talk. It's much shorter and informative than this one, and these are comfortable chairs. But this is kind of the summary of at J.P. Morgan Chase, a gigantic big bank. If you're not familiar with them, it's kind of the summary of what Nadi here was going over that their platform advocacy team does, the practices that they follow for their platform so that developers inside of JP Morgan Chase not only use their platform, but use it well and are successful at it, right? And they've been doing this. They have multiple platforms, of course, being a huge bank. They have a Cloud Foundry-based one. They've got a Kubernetes-based one. They probably have one based on AS400s or something, or is it 200? I forget. System I think we're supposed to say, starting 10 years ago. But you can see the practices that they follow here. And as I'll get into, I'm not going to go over all of these, but hopefully what you're kind of starting to see is they don't just think about the platform as infrastructure or operations, but they're really thinking about it in terms of what the application developers are doing with it. But again, I think this is a great talk to go to because you can see, unlike someone like me who just makes slides, they actually work on stuff. So hopefully they're a little more trustworthy with what they do. And check out this fancy font compliance they have, or typeface, if you will. So this is me. I did used to do programming. You can see I won an award, or my team did, back in FY05 when I worked at BMC Software, if you know them. If you happen to use any of my software, I'll be around afterwards. I can give you some counseling and explain why you had the experience that you did. But I worked at Pivotal for a while, and VMware acquired Pivotal. I don't know. I've been an industry analyst and done all sorts of things like that. But if you're really interested in more of my stuff, I've got newsletters and podcasts, and it's pretty easy to go to Cote.io. I was chided recently that I should always put the S in here, so it's in here, in case that really makes you happy. So first of all, what is a platform, right? I think it's pretty important to define what a platform is because it defines the boundaries of what you should be doing. And I found over the years in talking with large organizations about how they're successful at improving software, one of the most important things, the conversations we end up having, is discussing what they're not responsible for. And so therefore, how they can be happy because they feel like they've done a good job, right? Like if you think you're responsible for more than you actually are, maybe I'm giving myself some self-care here, but because you never get around to that stuff, you end up thinking that you're doing a poor job, and you kind of have a bad mindset about life and work in general. But therefore I think knowing what the boundaries of the platform are helpful, but it's also good to know what you should be doing beyond kind of like that blinking cursor of infrastructure, right? So you think about setting up any infrastructure. Again, think about the application developer who's going to use it. A lot of the infrastructure and operations people that I talk with, they sort of believe they're done when the developer gets a blinking cursor. And then the developer starts doing stuff. But really what I've found, and I think we've all found over the years with platforms, is that the blinking cursor is just the start of what platform people do. There's a lot more involved in it. And so to that end, this is from a recent, over here. I haven't used my laser pointer in a while, so this is pretty fun. This is a recent reference architecture from the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, the CNCF container factory. And you can see when you look at it, there's not really that big of an epiphany here about what a platform is. It basically, I've joked that it's just all the goopy stuff between the infrastructure layer and the kind of UI layer that a developer will do, right? So you clearly have things on top of your kind of raw infrastructure, the way that you configure, deploy things to it, manage it. You make sure it's instrumented so you can do all of your monitoring or whatever you want to call it nowadays. But then there's also a lot of the, I don't know what people call this anymore, the middleware, right? Like your databases, your event systems, even your SSO things, all that kind of reusable frameworky middleware stuff that a developer will use. And what's interesting and new now, and maybe what this notion of platform engineering has brought into the platform definition, is kind of this layer up here, which is kind of fun. These three boxes, which is I like to think of this layer as let's say we were building a platform. It has all that middleware, how we use the infrastructure and deploy software to it. And what if we also were responsible for all of our Atlassian software? And we built out the portals that people use, the internal sites, and then we're using something like Backstage to kind of be like the UI or the console that developers have, we'll move more and more into us, the traditional infrastructure operations people, being in charge of the tools that people use. And if you work at a tech company like I do, this is like, welcome to 2007 or something, right? Where you kind of realize that software is a core part of your business if you're selling it or providing it online. But in most large organizations, this idea of the infrastructure people owning all the way up to the tool stack is bonkers, right? Like, it's not really something that they focus so much on. And the reason this has come about, I think, is because what people are realizing is that if you integrate this whole stack together, you get a lot more advantages than if you have it separated out. And then also, people with stuff to sell like my company and others, we like doing this. We want to integrate a whole stack together and make it work out better. So we kind of are in this great era of a platform there. Now, you can look at whatever diagrams you want. Here's one that we have. But you can kind of see, as you look at any diagram of a platform, you end up having the same basic components over and over again, right? So I guess the key thing there is, like, you have all the expected stuff that you would think about. Nowadays, you're adding in the kind of, like, I still don't know quite what to call it. People like to call it an internal developer portal. But I grew up in the 2000s professionally, where you learn that if you ever see the word portal, you should just throw up a little bit. Because once you start using the word portal, you're about 3 to 6 months away from using the word portlet, and that's terrible. You don't want that. I can tell you about what happens when that occurs in your professional life. So that's kind of a notion of what a platform is. I think the other thing that's important is, if you look at their reference diagram, this is just like, I don't know, all that infrastructure stuff is sort of down here, hidden away somewhere, right? Like, it's not really something that gets exposed so much to your application developers. So that's the first lesson, right? Is define what this platform is. And the platform, more or less, I'm being metaphoric, as we are often forced to be in computing, but it goes all the way up to the actual new code that your application developers are using. How much of that responsibility and integration can the platform take on? So the second thing, and this is from my, I'll call him a work friend, my friend through work, Thomas over at Mercedes-Benz. He runs one of the platforms. He's not just him, but he's one of the platform owners of one of the platforms inside Mercedes. And this is the mentality, the way that he put it, right, is that when you're running this platform, you realize that you have customers, right? And those customers are the developers, which, like I said, I used to work at BMC Software. I don't know, it looks like some people in here might be familiar with the term ITEL. But if you know IT service management or ITEL or service delivery, whether it's V2, V3.5, V4, whatever it is, like, the notion of treating your developers as customers is not really present in traditional IT thinking. Your customer as a traditional infrastructure and operations person is really like, well, we're here at SREday, so I can shorthand it. Your customer is your SLAs, right? The numbers and the metrics, the Christmas tree of green, yellow, and red. That's what you're delivering, right? You're supposed to be delivering to these promises that you've made. But in this case, what Thomas and many other people are saying is that, like, sure, there's always a requirement that it works. That's good, right? Like, you want it to, like, run and do what you said it was going to. But the more sort of advanced layer is to think, like, so who's using this and what do they need to accomplish? And how can I iteratively, round by round, figure out how to make them doing their job better, right? Like, what do they need? How do they want to consume it? What do I do so that the application developer is more productive? However you define productivity, right? So that not only they can deliver more functionality at higher quality, depending on what you think quality means, but, like, I think at some point, just also so they're, like, happier, right? That their lives are going better. So what that implies is really very much so taking this almost literally and starting to think about product managing your platform, right? Not just thinking about how you're delivering your platform or building it, but you start to put in place the practice of product management. Now, someone like Thomas there is more or less the product manager of the platform that his team runs in Mercedes. or I'm sorry, they say Mercedes-Benz. I once did a presentation with him, and we had to make sure to use the proprietary Mercedes font, which was a thrilling 60-minute sort of session with the AV people to make sure that it worked perfectly. But it looked good, I guess. So if you're not familiar with product management, I'm going to give you a very bad characterization of it, right? But with product management, what you're focusing on is, one, finding your customer, right, an application developer. You get to know what their needs are, what problems they're solving. Part of what a product manager does is identify the things to work on, the problems to solve. There's a great body of theory called jobs to be done, which is fun. If you've never read about, you should look that up. But you're identifying what these jobs to be done are. And then as a product manager, not only are you familiar with what your customer is doing, but you go back to your team, the I don't know, whatever you want to call them, platform engineers, platform developers, and each cycle, each release that you do, you're prioritizing what features to put in. You're thinking what would be the best thing between what we're doing as a team, what we want to do as a company or an organization, what our customers want, and let's put that feature in this time. And then, this is the part we always ignored back when I won the FY05 Team Innovation Award. You actually observe if you solved the problem, if you made things better, and then you react accordingly. For us, we delivered on like an annual cycle, like, you know, who knows if you do a good job, if you deliver your software every year. The only feedback you get on that kind of cycle is bugs, which is not encouraging. So, yeah, I mean, just really like the easy thing there is, so if I'm running a platform, do I have a role that is called a product manager? If not, get that, right? Like that's what people pretty consistently do. So then also when it comes, so the other thing I see platform teams focusing on is really not only owning the platform, the kind of what do we say in the metaphorical way, the physical stack, so to speak, but having kind of like the logical product, the metaphoric product of whatever you want to call it, the value chain, the delivery pipeline, if you want to get like super fancy, the secure software supply chain, whatever you want to call all the stuff that happens from an idea to someone clicking and using your software, right? And I see platform teams like Thomas's and JP Morgan Chase, they almost start with this as what they're delivering, what their product is. And they spend a lot of time modeling it out from the get-go, but then also constantly monitoring, are we making things better? Are we shortening the wait times and the cycles, right? And this is one of those things that, like, I don't know, ever since the mid-2000s, we've talked about and heard about. So it's like, yes, that's great. We will do that. However, again, when I go out and talk with people, they very rarely know what this is, right? Like they might kind of know a notion of it, but then if you spend a couple of hours with them kind of whiteboarding this out, oftentimes they'll stand back and look at it and be like, wow, I've never seen that all before. There's a whole lot of stupid up there. And so like it really is good for your platform team to have, if not just interest, but responsibility for looking at this end-to-end thing and think about how can we contribute to that? Because this is kind of what their customer, the application developer, is going through and what their life is like. So it's what you want to help them out with. So, like I said, I'm always very aware of what you're not supposed to do in presentations, like put a lot of text on here. I have another theory of presentations that, aside from like, I don't know, TED Talks or whatever, if you can stand those, that most presentations, you should think about them as Word documents or Open Libre or Google Docs, whatever you like, but basically Word documents that have been accidentally printed in landscape, which I guess I'm demonstrating here. But one of the other things you can do as you're product managing your platform stuff is developers. I don't know if you are an application developer, have ever been one, or have talked with them, but the number one thing they like doing is complaining and telling you how things could be better. That's a positive way of saying complaining. And so you should just go ask them, say like, what's wrong? I mean, this is something that product managers love doing. And, you know, if you're not kind of familiar with the life of an application developer, you can just send out a survey like this. I made sure that we made freely available one of the surveys that we use, the developer toil survey. But really, you can just send this out initially to as many developers as you want to. You may think they won't want to spend the time to fill out a survey, but I'll go back to what I said earlier. They will delight in telling you what's wrong and how things could be improved. That's why developers have like 90-minute lunches, because they have to spend about 30 minutes just complaining about stuff. It also takes a long time to figure out where to eat, things like that. But you could send this out maybe, let's say, every 2 weeks initially, maybe monthly as you get into a steady state. But this is a part of product management, that feedback part that I said we used to ignore, that becomes very handy. Like, as you're working on your platform and integrating up to the tool chain, you can guess what you're supposed to see in the results here. They get better, right? Like, if the answers to these questions, you can use a Likert scale of like, tell me how you agree or disagree with these things on a scale of 1 to 5. And you want to see improvements in these questions over time, especially the ones that you're working on, or you have more work you could do to make things better, right? Like, you want to constantly be monitoring if you're making things work out better for you. So the fifth thing that out of 7 that I see organizations doing, that, the degree to which they do this is the point that I like to make around this, is they do a lot of marketing or advocacy, if you don't like to use the word marketing. And that's going back to that JP Morgan Chase presentation. That's a lot of what that team does, is they spend time not only training, but just telling the application developers and their organizations about the platform. And they spend a lot of time coming up with the brand, the names, like even like cupcakes that have like their logo on it and things like that. And I have one of my teammates, Deshaun, he likes to joke that the first thing he asks people when they say they have an interest in platform is like, do you have a t-shirt yet? And what he means by that is to kind of wrap up, you're going to have a brand, an identity, a bunch of marketing around your platform, so you should do that immediately, right? And it's true. Like, people want to identify with the technology that they use. Very few people are like, I'm a developer. They're like, I'm a Java developer. I'm a whatever React is developer. I'm a JavaScript developer. Although I guess everyone does JavaScript. But like, when you're an application developer, you identify with the technologies and the tools that you use. And so, most people at conferences like this are very skeptical of the power of marketing. But if you can get people to identify with it, it's very useful as far as their productivity and them using it. And then the other thing that happens quite frequently is about on a quarterly basis, you start having internal conferences, whether that's all online. If you're lucky, it'll be regionally in person. And you've hired, usually from the beginning, at least one person who is just full-time your developer advocate, your platform advocate. And you can see one of them in action up here. But they will go out to these regional conferences, and you basically get whatever application developers, architects, and other people in that area, and you put on a little road show, not only going over what's in the platform, but over time, as I'll get to, what you do is you find other application developers who have been successful with your platform, who have used it, and they give presentations. And and then what you're doing there, all of this is geared towards getting people to use your platform, which turns out to be a huge problem. If you've ever stood up a platform and then like a year later, you're like, I don't know why these silly application developers aren't using my platform. Here it is. It's probably because you haven't been doing enough marketing around it. But what you want to engage eventually, not only coming up with the brand and the way that you're kind of working with your community, is you want to build up word of mouth amongst all the developers that like, not only does this platform exist, but hey, it'll make it so you can have a 2-hour lunch instead of just a 90-minute one, right? Like, you want to really appeal to developers to use this platform and have fun with it. I don't know if have fun is what they need to do. That would be a cool effect. So kind of, how do you roll this out, right? And I've seen over the years basically 2 phases to doing it. And the first one is here. And that is the initial phase. Now this, I separate this out because the initial phase is distinct from doing a lot of it. And it really is like, so the first, 3 to 6 months, depending on how relaxed you are, how much work-life balance in favor of life you want to have. That's a funny phrase, right? Work-life balance. We should probably just try to work as little as possible balance, I think would be a better way of putting it. But what you're going to do is you're building your platform. And right from the beginning, you want to find at least one application. You could call it a project, but some people are like, you should do products, not projects. But like, you find one application that you're going to have on the platform, and therefore one team of developers, even before you like really have the platform figured out. And if you've got any notion of what product management is, what you're doing is you're picking your first customers to define and explore what's even going to be in your platform and what's needed, right? And so you have that initial team working on it, kind of helping you co-innovate and figure out what needs to be in the platform. But there's a second thing that you're doing that's very valuable, which is you're figuring out how to bring this platform to life in your organization, right? Like you're inevitably going to discover some strange, bizarre certificate handling mechanism that you have. And then you're inevitably going to figure out that there's like some networking and security problem. There's probably going to be like one person who controls a build that like mysteriously never shows up to a meeting to relinquish control over how the build is done. On and on and on, right? Like you're going to find out all these things that are kind of idiosyncratic to your organization that you couldn't have predicted at the beginning. Now, the opposite of what I'm saying here, starting with one or two teams, is if you're like, all right, we're going to launch this platform initiative. We had the VMware person come here and we authorized like 3 million of spend, which would be great. They would really like it if you did that. And so therefore, we need to hit this ROI number. So we're going to have 50 of our projects running on this platform by the end of the year. That's not going to go well, except for my sales friends. It's going to be a disaster because you're not going to actually know what works and what doesn't work and how to get it started in your organization. So you want to start small in this first 3 months and really pay attention to and learn what this initial team is doing. Now after that, and again, depending on how leisurely you are about it, after 3, 4, 6 months or so, after these initial few teams, what I see organizations doing, and you can see this kind of proven out in the DevOps reports and just anecdotally, the kind of work that we've done at Pivotal and VMware over the years with large organizations, is you follow this pairing and seeding approach for spreading knowledge. So you can definitely have a cloud center of excellence, a COE, kind of like, a central training authority, and you can have some enterprise architects doing stuff here and there. But the most effective way I've seen this happen is that you have that initial team or two of people, and then right away you know that you're going to be doing the following. So you identify 1 or 2 people on each of those teams who likes to meet new people and talk with them. And after they've been somewhat successful, after 3 or so months, you take that person and you move them to one of the new teams that you'll be bringing to that platform. Because again, if you think in terms of marketing, what you're doing there is you have some existing knowledge of how it works, a person who trusts it, but also someone who's likely to be trusted by the other people, the other developers, right? It's not just some like fast-talking, slide-making person like me being like, hey, platforms, they're pretty awesome, JP Morgan Chase. It's actually someone who's used this platform in your organization that's kind of at your same level, a peer. And then that person will help you learn, will help these new developers learn and understand and be successful with that platform as well. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I have a philosophy degree, so I don't know how to do math unless it's in Greek letters. But I think there's some sort of exponential effect that you have, like that shampoo commercial where if you tell 2 friends and they tell 2 friends and so forth and so on, you can see how that spreads out to the rest of your organization, right? It's how you kind of scale out doing things in a new way. But what's critical there is you're scaling out trust in the system, right? You're helping get over people's unwillingness and fear of change. And that's it. So finally, I'll take a bit of a smarmy prerogative. If you're really interested in programming and things like that, October 12th, we've got a free conference you can come to. A bunch of the people that will be there. You should come check it out. I'll be emceeing. They don't let me talk about any of the technical stuff there. But I also learned how to make images transparent, which is really the only reason I'm showing this. And check out this guy. There's Deshaun, who asked about T-shirts right there. Well, thanks. I appreciate the chance to go over this with you. I'll be around for the rest of the day. And, there's more info there if you're interested in it. I appreciate it.
Do we have any questions?
Hi. Just
Hello.
a question. So how would you define what a platform is for a given organization? How would you find it?
Well, I think I would say it is, well, you could go look at the old NIST definitions of platform as a service. I mean, that's the quick answer, is to point you at something else. I mean, it's right there in the name. But I would basically say it is the tool chain that developers use to build and configure to make their application ready to be deployed. And then I would also say it's like the runtime environment for their application, right? I don't really know the terminology people use for this anymore. because I don't think there is. But it's like I write the application and then I must run it in a thing. Most people write distributed applications nowadays, but it's like all of the management of how the components work with each other, the data store that you have, all of that middleware stuff integrated together as much as possible. Now, to answer it in a negative form, kind of going back to that blinking cursor thing, you could have your application developers write their own platform, and now you have two problems, right? Like if you think about all the different like applications you have in a big organization, it's probably a bad idea for every single one of those people to build up what that platform is, right? Because now, you have to manage that and deal with that. So I realize that's not a great definition, but hence my referring to the reference architectures for things.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Great talk, thanks. I'm witnessing a platform being developed, and one thing that happened early on seems to be, because you mentioned, is there a T-shirt yet, was vaporware, and I wonder if you had any thoughts on the dangers of creating an identity and a brand before there's any real substance, and the impact on trust.
Sure. Yes, that's bad. I think that's why, not why, but I think the way to address that or prevent it is to have, like I was saying, that initial phase where you actually have an application team, right? So instead of just starting off with like, let's do 3 to 4 months of analysis and build up this thing and make sure we got the right SVGs and print up the T-shirts, and then we'll get the developers to come use it, right? Like what I've noticed when people are starting up platforms is even before that, this is good, I should probably mention that in this presentation, but before they develop that brand, they do start to work with one developer team, right? And so you kind of kick off everything at once. You identify a developer, a team that you'll be working with. You start thinking about your marketing. You start thinking about what's in the platform. So you start that all at once, right? And that way, hopefully, you do avoid the, as you say, the vaporware issue. But, and again, this is like, at least it comes from an extreme programming and a lean product management type of product management thing is like, you always have a customer. Like if you don't have a customer, then you are making vaporware no matter how hard you're trying, right? Like you need that feedback about the usefulness of what you have. But yeah, that doesn't sound like a cool situation.